The whisper of silk, the glint of a diamond, the sweet scent of impending fatherhood. Amelia had orchestrated the perfect surprise. A gift not just of luxury, but of love sent to her husband's gleaming corporate office. It was a testament to their shared future, a future she carried gently within her. But in the sterile air of that high-rise, another woman's hands adorned with rings he'd also bought would tear open the carefully wrapped package. The scream that followed wasn't one of delight. It was a sound that would shatter the pristine facade of their perfect life, exposing a web of deceit so intricate that the truth would be the most devastating blow of all. Amelia traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. From the 35th floor of their penthouse apartment, the city sprawled beneath her like a glittering tapestry, a world she and Julian had conquered together. Or rather, a world Julian had conquered and she had graciously adorned. Her reflection in the panoramic window showed a woman who had everything a husband whose name echoed in the halls of finance, a home that graced the covers of architectural magazines, and a baby, their baby nestled safely in her womb. She was 6 months along the gentle swell of her stomach, a constant, wondrous reminder of the new life she was nurturing. This pregnancy, a hard-won miracle after years of quiet heartbreak, had cemented what she believed to be an unbreakable bond with Julian. He had been ecstatic, his usual cool demeanor melting away to reveal a man of surprising tenderness. He'd ordered a custom-built crib from a bespoke furniture maker in Italy, filled a room with every conceivable baby gadget, and massaged her swollen ankles every night with a devotion that brought tears to her eyes. Julian was a man of grand gestures. Their life was a testament to it. Their wedding had been a week-long affair on the Amalfi coast. Her birthdays were marked by surprise trips to Paris or the acquisition of a rare piece of art. He'd once bought out an entire Michelin-starred restaurant for a private dinner, simply because she'd mentioned a craving for their truffle pasta. He called her his queen, his everything. And Amelia, swept away by the sheer force of his affection and the dazzling world he provided, had believed it. Every single word. Today was the anniversary of the day they'd first met. A detail she was sure Julian, in his whirlwind of meetings and multi-million-dollar deals, had forgotten. But Amelia hadn't. She cherished these small, intimate milestones. They were the invisible threads that wove their grand love story together. To commemorate it, she had planned a surprise that was both deeply personal and a nod to the life he so meticulously curated. She had commissioned a one-of-a-kind timepiece, a Patek Philippe Calatrava, with a secret inscription on the back. It wasn't a flamboyant, diamond-encrusted model. It was classic, elegant, timeless. Everything she felt their love was. The inscription was a line from a poem they'd both loved in college, a poignant reminder of their humbler beginnings before the towering skyscrapers and private jets. My soul, your soul, 2 stars in the same sky. But the watch was only part of the gift. Tucked inside the luxurious lacquered box was a small silver-plated frame. Inside it wasn't a photo of them, but the first sonogram picture of their baby, the tiny, grainy image that had made Julian weep with joy. And beside it, a handwritten note on her thick, cream-colored stationery. My dearest Julian, remember the starry nights on that rusty fire escape, dreaming of a future we could barely imagine today on the anniversary of our first hello. I wanted to give you something to remind you that even in our dazzling sky, some stars shine just for us. This little one is our newest star. I love you more than words can say. Happy anniversary. Forever yours, Amelia. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. It was perfect. She had arranged for a premium courier service, the kind that handled priceless art and sensitive tournaments, to deliver it to his office at precisely 3 p.m. She imagined his surprise, his colleagues catching a glimpse of the devoted family man behind the ruthless CEO. She pictured him calling her, his voice thick with emotion, thanking her for remembering, for loving him so completely. The courier, a man in a crisp uniform, arrived exactly on time. He handled the elegantly wrapped package with the reverence it deserved. Amelia gave him the address. Sterling Whitcroft Holdings, 48th floor, 1 Vanderbilt, Manhattan. The name of the building itself was a symbol of power and prestige, a fitting stage for her grand romantic gesture. "Please ensure this is handed directly to Mr. Julian Croft," she instructed, pressing a generous tip into the courier's hand. "It's of immense personal value." "Of course, Mrs. Croft. It will be delivered with the utmost care." As the door clicked shut, a wave of contentment washed over her. She settled onto the plush velvet sofa, picking up a book on motherhood. The afternoon sun streamed in, casting a warm glow on the pages. For the next hour, she was lost in a world of feeding schedules and developmental milestones, her heart full of a quiet, unshakable joy. She was Amelia Croft, the cherished wife of a brilliant man, soon to be the mother of his child. Her world was perfect, secure, and shimmering with love. The scream that would tear it all apart was still hours away, an impossible sound in a life so meticulously soundproofed from reality. Julian's office was an extension of his personality, sleek, modern, and intimidating. Glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, but the real power was inside the room. A massive mahogany desk, an array of monitors displaying fluctuating market data, and a collection of abstract art that was both expensive and emotionally distant. It was a space designed to communicate dominance. His executive assistant, a woman in her late 50s with a stern but efficient demeanor, guarded the entrance to this inner sanctum like a hawk. She vetted his calls, managed his impossible schedule, and could spot a sycophant from a mile away. Her name was Margaret, and she was fiercely loyal to Julian. She was also, Amelia knew, fond of her. Margaret often commented on how Amelia was a calming influence on her demanding boss. When the courier arrived at the 48th floor, it was Margaret he met. "A package for Mr. Julian Croft," the courier announced, presenting the beautifully wrapped box. "Personal delivery." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. It wasn't unusual for gifts to arrive, but this had a different feel. It was elegant, personal, not the usual ostentatious corporate gift basket. She recognized the expensive wrapping paper, the same kind Amelia had used for Julian's last birthday gift. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. "Thank you. I'll see that he gets it," she said, signing the electronic pad. She carried the gift towards Julian's office, her heels clicking softly on the polished marble floor. The glass door was slightly ajar, and she could hear voices from within. Julian's deep, confident tone and a lighter, feminine laugh that was decidedly not Amelia's. Margaret paused. This was the delicate part of her job, the part she hated, the part where she had to navigate the other side of Julian Croft's life, the side that Amelia in her gilded cage knew nothing about. The laugh belonged to Cassandra. Cassandra was a senior analyst in the mergers and acquisitions department. She was whip-smart, ambitious, and stunningly beautiful in a way that was the polar opposite of Amelia's classic elegance. Where Amelia was soft curves and gentle smiles, Cassandra was sharp angles and a predatory gaze. She had raven black hair, cut in a severe, stylish bob, and a wardrobe of form-fitting dresses that were just on the edge of office appropriate. She was a shark in a sea of sharks, and she had set her sights on Julian Croft from the day she'd walked into the firm. Margaret had seen it all unfold. The late-night strategy sessions, the business trips that coincidentally involved a layover in a romantic city, the lingering touches and shared glances that crackled with an energy that had nothing to do with stock prices. She despised Cassandra, not just for the blatant affair, but for the danger she posed to the kind, unsuspecting woman who was carrying Julian's child. She could hear their conversation more clearly now. "The deal is sealed. We'll announce the acquisition on Monday," Julian was saying. "We should celebrate." Cassandra purred, her voice dripping with suggestion. "My place tonight. I'll open that bottle of single malt you like." "I can't tonight, Cass. Amelia is—" He trailed off, but Margaret could fill in the blank. "Amelia is pregnant. Amelia is waiting for me at home." "Right." The little wifey Cassandra's tone was laced with a derision she barely tried to conceal. "How is she, by the way? Still enjoying her life as a professional lunch-goer?" Margaret's hand tightened on the package. The insult to Amelia was a physical blow. She despised this woman's cruelty. "Be nice." Julian's voice was firm, but it lacked real conviction. He never defended Amelia with the ferocity he used to defend a business deal. "I'm just saying," Cassandra continued, undeterred. "You're here closing the biggest deal of the year, a titan of the industry, and she's at home." "What, picking out nursery colours?" "It's a bit of a mismatch, don't you think?" Before Julian could respond, Margaret decided to make her presence known. She knocked sharply on the doorframe. "Julian. A personal delivery for you." Julian looked up, his expression shifting from one of intimate conspiracy to professional command in a split second. Cassandra, however, didn't bother to school her features. She shot Margaret a look of pure annoyance, angry at the interruption. "Bring it in." "Margaret," Julian said, gesturing towards his desk. As Margaret walked in, Cassandra's eyes landed on the gift. Her expression changed from annoyance to a covetous curiosity. It was clearly expensive, clearly personal, and in Cassandra's mind, anything personal and expensive belonging to Julian should by rights be related to her. "Ooh, what's this?" "An admirer?" she asked, stepping forward. She ran a perfectly manicured finger over the silk ribbon. "Let me guess. A gift from the board for closing the Henderson deal." "It's from my wife, Julian," said a little too quickly. He made a move to take the box, but Cassandra was faster. With a playful, possessive flick of her wrist, she snatched it from Margaret's grasp. "From Amelia." Cassandra's red lips curled into a smirk. "How sweet. What did she get?" "Another set of monogrammed handkerchiefs." "Cassandra, give it to me." Julian's voice held a warning tone. This was a line he wasn't prepared to cross in front of his assistant. But Cassandra was fueled by arrogance and a desire to needle him, to assert her place in his life. She saw herself not as the mistress, but as his true partner, the one who understood his world of power and ambition. Amelia was just a domestic accessory. "Oh, don't be such a spoil-sport." "Darling," she cooed, her voice loud enough for anyone passing in the hallway to hear. "I want to see what perfect taste your perfect wife has. Let's open it together." And with that, before Julian or Margaret could react, Cassandra's sharp, blood-red nails tore into the elegant wrapping paper. She ripped it open with a careless, almost violent motion, a stark contrast to the love and care with which Amelia had wrapped it just hours before. The lid of the Patek Philippe box was revealed. Cassandra's eyes widened with genuine surprise and a flash of greed. "Well, well, Mrs. Croft has expensive taste," she murmured, lifting the heavy lid. The classic, understated beauty of the Calatrava gleamed up at them. For a moment there was silence. Julian stared, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Margaret held her breath, a sense of dread coiling in her stomach. And then Cassandra saw what was nestled beside the watch. She picked up the small silver frame. She tilted it towards the light. Her brow furrowed in confusion. And then she saw it, the grainy black and white image. The unmistakable shape of a fetus, her face a mask of triumphant arrogance just seconds before contorted. The color drained from her cheeks, her crimson lips parted. And then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise or delight. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated shock and horror. A sound of a carefully constructed reality, shattering into a million pieces. A sound that echoed through the glass-walled office, out into the hushed professional quiet of the 48th floor. A primal cry of a secret blown wide open. The scream ripped through the sterile air of the 48th floor, sharp and visceral. It was a sound that didn't belong amidst the quiet hum of servers and the muted ringing of phones. Heads popped up over cubicle walls. The low murmur of business chatter ceased. In that one piercing moment, every eye on the floor was turned towards the glass-walled office of Julian Croft. Inside the scene was frozen. Julian stood, his face a ghastly shade of pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and panic. Margaret was rooted to the spot, her professional composure finally cracking as she stared at the unfolding disaster, and Cassandra was trembling. Her hand clapped over her mouth, as if to shove the scream back down her throat. Her other hand still held the silver frame, but her knuckles were white, her grip so tight it threatened to crush the delicate object. What is this?" she finally whispered, her voice a ragged, broken thing. She thrust the sonogram picture towards Julian, her eyes wild and accusing. "What is this?" "Julian!" Julian finally jolted into action, lunged forward and snatched the frame from her hand. He grabbed the watchbox, shoving the picture and the handwritten note back inside with clumsy, frantic movements. "Get out!" he hissed at Cassandra, his voice low and venomous. "Get out now!" But Cassandra wasn't listening. Her gaze was locked on his face, searching for an answer, a denial, anything. You told me you were leaving her. You said the marriage was just for appearances, a business arrangement." Her voice began to rise again, teetering on the edge of hysteria. "You don't have a baby with a business arrangement, Julian." I said. "Get out!" he roared, his voice finally exploding, echoing his earlier command, but now filled with raw, desperate anger. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh, and began to physically propel her towards the door. "Let go of me," she shrieked, struggling against his grip. "You lied to me. All this time you've been lying to me." The spectacle was now on full display for the entire senior management floor. Colleagues, rivals, and subordinates alike were staring, their faces a mixture of shock, fascination, and thinly veiled schadenfreude. The pristine facade of Julian Croft, the untouchable master of the universe, was cracking right before their eyes. Margaret, her training kicking in, moved swiftly to the door. "Everything is fine," she announced in a firm, commanding voice to the gawking crowd. Mr. Croft is handling a private matter. Please return to your work." She pulled the door shut, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the charged silence. She then turned back to the chaos within. Julian had managed to shove Cassandra out of his office, slamming the door behind her. He leaned against it, his chest heaving, his tie askew. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time Margaret had ever seen. He looked cornered, trapped. Through the glass wall they could see Cassandra stumbling back to her own desk, a trail of stunned and whispering colleagues in her wake. She collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs. The damage was done. The secret was out. The carefully compartmentalized worlds of Julian Croft had just collided with the force of a nuclear explosion. Julian turned his eyes, finally landing on Margaret. His expression was one of pure fury, but it was the desperate fury of a man who has lost control. Not a word of this to anyone, Margaret, he seethed, especially not to Amelia. Do you understand me? Margaret met his gaze, her own expression unreadable. For years, she had been his loyal soldier, his gatekeeper, the silent facilitator of his double life. She had rationalized it as part of the job, a necessary evil in the high-stakes world they inhabited. But the sound of Cassandra's scream, the sight of that tiny sonogram picture, had shifted something within her. It was no longer an abstract indiscretion. It was a betrayal of a woman she respected, a woman who was blissfully awaiting the birth of her child. She is going to call Julian. Margaret, said her voice, steady and cool. She is expecting you to thank her for your gift. What are you going to say? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Julian stared at the Patek Philippe box on his desk as if it were a venomous snake. The gift meant to be a symbol of love and shared history had become an instrument of his exposure. Amelia's perfect, heartfelt gesture had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. He snatched the box, opened it, and pulled out the handwritten note. He read Amelia's loving words, her reference to their shared past, her excitement for their future. His face, already pale, seemed to lose another shade of color. The sincerity of her love, the purity of her intentions, was a searing indictment of his own duplicity. I'll handle it, he muttered, shoving the note into his pocket. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Amelia's contact photo. A picture of her smiling, radiant on a beach in the Maldives. He looked like a man about to walk to his own execution. Meanwhile, back in her sun-drenched penthouse, Amelia was beginning to feel the first stirrings of unease. It was now well past 4 p.m. She had expected a call from Julian almost immediately. He was usually so prompt, so effusive in his gratitude for her gifts. She pictured the scene in his office again, but this time a small, unwelcome detail crept in the press of his schedule, an important meeting he couldn't leave, a sudden market crisis demanding his attention. She reassured herself. He was a busy man. That was part of the package. He would call when he could. She tried to go back to her book, but the words blurred on the page. She checked her phone. No missed calls. No messages. She decided to call him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. You've reached Julian Croft. I'm unavailable at the moment. Please leave a message. This was unusual. Julian prided himself on his accessibility, at least to her. His phone was an extension of his hand. For him not to answer was strange. For him not to have called her by now was almost unheard of. A tiny seed of anxiety began to sprout in the fertile ground of her waiting. She told herself she was being silly, that the pregnancy hormones were making her oversensitive. She made herself another cup of herbal tea, the steam warming her hands, but not the chill that was beginning to creep into her heart. Back on the 48th floor, Julian was staring at his phone, watching Amelia's call go to voicemail. He couldn't talk to her. Not now. Not when the sound of Cassandra's scream was still ringing in his ears. What would he say? How could he possibly feign the delight and emotion she would be expecting? His voice would betray him. His guilt was a physical thing, a sour taste in his mouth. He looked at the gift box. He had to hide it. He couldn't take it home. Amelia would expect to see him wearing the watch. She would ask where he had put the picture frame. The entire gift was now radioactive, a piece of evidence in a crime he was desperate to conceal. He looked at Margaret, his eyes pleading. "I need you to what, Julian?" She cut him off, her tone sharp. "To lie for you, to clean up this mess. My job is to manage your schedule, not your infidelities." The insubordination was shocking, and they both knew it. But Margaret had reached her limit. Julian's face hardened. "You will do what I tell you to do, Margaret. Your loyalty is to me and to this company. Your very generous salary depends on it." The threat hung in the air, ugly and undisguised. Margaret stared back at him, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of complicity, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice flat and devoid of its usual warmth. "Take this," he said, pushing the Patek Philippe box towards her. "Get it out of here. I don't care what you do with it. Sell it. Throw it in the Hudson River. Just make sure it disappears. And it never ever gets back to my wife." He then turned his attention to the more immediate problem, Cassandra. He strode out of his office, ignoring the renewed whispers and stares, and marched directly to her desk. "My office." Now, he commanded. Cassandra, her face tear-streaked and blotchy, looked up at him with a mixture of hatred and heartbreak. She followed him back to his office, and he shut the door firmly behind them. "You have 5 minutes to pack your personal belongings," he said, his voice cold and devoid of any emotion. "Security will escort you from the building. Your severance package will be generous. But it is contingent on you signing a non-disclosure agreement, so comprehensive it will prevent you from even thinking my name. Is that clear?" Cassandra stared at him aghast. "You're firing me." Her voice was a choked whisper. "After everything. After all your promises." "The promises were based on a discretion you have just proven incapable of," Julian retorted icily. "You created a scene. You disrupted the entire floor. You are a liability. The situation is over. You are over." The cruelty was breathtaking. The man who had whispered promises of a future together was now discarding her like a failed business venture. Cassandra's heartbreak curdled into a cold, hard rage. "You think you can just get rid of me," she hissed. "You think you can silence me with money. You have no idea who you're messing with, Julian. I know everything. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the Cayman deal. I know where all the bodies are buried. You may have fired me from your company, but you are not rid of me." She turned and walked out of his office, her head held high, leaving a stunned Julian in her wake. He had solved one problem by firing her, but he had just created a much, much bigger one. He had underestimated Cassandra's fury, and he had no idea just how far she would go to get her revenge. And miles away in the quiet luxury of her penthouse, Amelia looked at the clock. It was almost 5 p.m. The silence from her husband was no longer just strange. It was a screaming, gaping void that was starting to swallow her perfect world whole. She picked up her phone and dialed a different number. It was a number she rarely used, but one she knew by heart. It was Margaret's direct line at the office. "Margaret." "It's Amelia Croft," she said, trying to keep her voice light and casual. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I've been trying to reach Julian. Is he in a meeting? I sent a package over earlier, and I just wanted to make sure he received it." On the other end of the line, Margaret closed her eyes. She held the heavy Patek Philippe box in her lap. The lie Julian wanted her to tell felt like poison on her tongue. But the threat to her livelihood, the years of ingrained loyalty, and a flicker of misguided pity for the man whose life was imploding, made her hesitate. "Yes, Mrs. Croft." Margaret began, her voice carefully neutral. "He's just been pulled into an emergency conference call with the London office. The market is very volatile today. He did ask me to tell you that he received your gift and he loves it. He said he would call you the second he is free." The lie was delivered, the first of many, and as Amelia hung up, a wave of relief washed over her, chasing away the earlier anxiety. Of course, a market crisis. It all made sense. She was being silly oversensitive. Her Julian was just busy conquering the world. He loved her gift. Everything was fine. But Margaret, as she placed the phone back in its cradle, felt a profound sense of shame. She looked at the expensive box in her lap, the symbol of a pure love that had been so cruelly desecrated. She thought of the furious, vengeful woman who had just been fired and the kind, pregnant woman who had just been lied to. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was far from over. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. Julian returned home that evening, the very picture of the doting husband. He came bearing a bouquet of Amelia's favorite peonies and a story expertly crafted of a frantic day-long crisis involving a sudden currency devaluation that had threatened a major European acquisition. "I'm so sorry, my love," he said, enveloping her in a hug. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, his lips carefully avoiding hers. "I was chained to my desk all day. Margaret told you I got your gift." Amelia melted into his embrace, her earlier anxieties seeming foolish and distant. "She did. I'm just glad everything is okay." "Did you like it?" she asked, her eyes searching his for the emotional response she had been anticipating all day. Julian's performance was flawless. He smiled a warm, crinkling smile that almost reached his eyes. "Liked it, Amelia?" I was speechless. "It's magnificent. The Calatrava, it's a work of art. And the inscription, it took me right back to that fire escape." He paused, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But the picture, that was the real gift. I almost lost it right there in front of the entire board. It was exactly what she had wanted to hear. The perfect reaction. Yet a tiny, almost imperceptible detail felt off." He spoke the words with practiced ease, but the genuine, soul-shaking emotion she had expected to see in his eyes wasn't quite there. It was like watching a brilliant actor play a part rather than witnessing a true, heartfelt reaction. But she dismissed the feeling as quickly as it came. He was tired. It had been a long, stressful day. "Where is it?" she asked, a playful smile on her face. "I expected you to come home wearing it." Julian didn't miss a beat. "Are you crazy?" "A Patek Philippe. That beautiful. I took one look at it and locked it straight in the office safe. It's far too valuable to be worn every day, and especially not on a day as chaotic as today. I'd be terrified of scratching it. We'll take it out for our anniversary dinner on Saturday. It was a plausible, even sensible explanation. It was so Julian, protective of beautiful, expensive things. And so Amelia accepted it. She accepted his excuses, his carefully constructed narrative, the slight distance in his kiss. She wanted to believe him. Her entire world, the very foundation of her happiness, depended on it. Life returned to its glossy, perfect rhythm. Julian went to the office, Amelia attended her prenatal yoga classes, and oversaw the final touches on the nursery. They talked about baby names, debated the merits of different strollers, and planned a baby moon in the Seychelles. Julian was attentive, charming, and affectionate, but Amelia couldn't shake a subtle, persistent feeling of unease. It was in the small things. He started keeping his phone face down on the nightstand, something he'd never done before. He was more jumpy, a sudden noise making him flinch. He claimed it was the residual stress from the market crisis, but there was a furtive, hunted look in his eyes that she'd never seen before. He also began to work later, claiming the European acquisition required late-night calls and endless paperwork. He would come home long after she had gone to bed, slipping under the covers, with the cool silence of a ghost. A week after the incident, Amelia had a doctor's appointment. It was a routine checkup, and she'd asked Julian to come with her, hoping they could hear the baby's heartbeat together again. He had agreed enthusiastically, but on the morning of the appointment, he called, his voice strained. "Darling, I'm so sorry. I'm completely swamped. We're in the final stages of due diligence on the Henderson deal. I can't possibly get away." "The Henderson deal?" Amelia asked, confused. "I thought that was the deal that closed last week, the one that caused the big crisis." There was a fractional pause on the other end of the line. No. That was the precursor. This is the final, painstaking legal work. It's incredibly tedious. I promise I'll be at the next one. Get me a new picture of our little star. Okay. She hung up, a knot of disappointment tightening in her chest. She went to the appointment alone, sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by beaming couples. She listened to the strong, rhythmic thump of her baby's heart, a sound of profound joy that was now tinged with a lonely sadness. That afternoon, needing a distraction, she decided to do some shopping. As she browsed in a high-end baby boutique, her phone buzzed. It was an email notification. The subject line was blank. The sender was an address she didn't recognize, Karma. RSA bitch at protonmail.com. Curiosity piqued, she opened it. There was no text, just a single attachment, a video file. Hesitantly, she tapped to download it. It was short, only about 15 seconds long, and the quality was grainy, clearly filmed on a phone from a distance. The video showed a man and a woman standing outside a sleek, modern apartment building at night. They were arguing. The man was Julian. The woman was beautiful, with striking dark hair and a furious expression. Amelia's heart began to pound in her chest. She recognized the woman. She had seen her once or twice at company functions. Cassandra, an analyst from his firm. The audio was faint, but Amelia turned the volume all the way up, pressing the phone to her ear. "Can't just throw me away." Cassandra's voice was high and shrill. "The deal is done, Cassandra. It's over." Julian's voice was cold, dismissive. "Is it? Or are you just scared? Scared your perfect little wife will find out. Her perfect little life is a complete and utter lie." The video ended. Amelia stood frozen in the middle of the baby boutique, surrounded by soft pastels and cheerful animal motifs. The air left her lungs. A cold, terrifying dread, far worse than any anxiety she had felt before, washed over her. A lie. Her perfect life is a complete and utter lie. Her hands shaking, she stumbled out of the store, nearly colliding with another shopper. She hailed a taxi, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. An argument. It could be work-related. Cassandra had just been fired. Julian had told her for poor performance and a bad attitude. Maybe this was just the fallout from that. But Cassandra's words. "Scared your perfect little wife will find out." The words echoed in her head, a venomous chorus. No, it wasn't possible. Julian loved her. He was the father of her child. They were building a life together. This woman, this Cassandra, was just a bitter, disgruntled ex-employee trying to cause trouble. That had to be it. But the seed of doubt once planted had taken root, and it was growing its thorny vines wrapping around her heart. When she got home, the penthouse felt different. It was no longer a sanctuary. It felt like a stage, a beautifully decorated set for a play in which she was the unknowing lead. She walked into Julian's home office, a space she rarely entered. It was as immaculate as ever. She ran her hand over his desk, her eyes scanning for, she didn't even know what. Her gaze fell upon his briefcase, which he had left by his chair. On a sudden, uncharacteristic impulse, she opened it. Inside were files, a laptop, a leather-bound notebook. She picked up the notebook. His handwriting, a sharp, decisive script, filled the pages. It was mostly meeting notes, market analysis numbers. And then she saw it. Tucked into a side pocket of the notebook was a receipt. A jewelry receipt dated 2 months ago. It was from Cartier. The item purchased a Trinity ring. Amelia's breath caught. The Trinity ring. 3 interlocking bands of gold, a symbol of love, fidelity, and friendship. It was a beautiful, romantic piece, and Julian had not given it to her. Her mind flashed back to the video, to Cassandra's hands gesturing angrily. She remembered seeing the glint of gold on her finger. 3 interlocking bands. The blood drained from Amelia's face. She sank into Julian's leather office chair, the receipt trembling in her hand. This wasn't a disgruntled employee. This was his mistress. The late nights, the business trips, the sudden distance. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The lie wasn't just in the video. The lie was her entire life. And then a worse thought, a thought so monstrous it made her feel physically ill. The gift. The Patek Philippe. The sonogram. The story about the office safe suddenly seemed laughably thin. The praise for the gift felt hollow, rehearsed. Why had he really hidden it? What had really happened that day? The pieces began to form a horrifying mosaic in her mind. The scream that Cassandra had let out in the video. It was a scream of shock. What if she hadn't been screaming at Julian in the street? What if she had screamed in his office? Amelia's mind raced back to the day she sent the gift. Her call to Margaret. Margaret's smooth, reassuring lie. He's in a conference call. He loves the gift. Margaret. Margaret would know. She was Julian's gatekeeper. She saw everything, heard everything. And despite her professional demeanor, Amelia had always felt a current of warmth from the older woman, a hint of sympathy. With a resolve she didn't know she possessed. Amelia stood up. The hurt, the betrayal. It was a physical weight threatening to crush her. But beneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard anger. She had been played for a fool. Her love, her pregnancy, her most sacred feelings had been used as props in his sordid drama. She would not be a victim. She would find out the truth. The whole truth. She picked up her phone and dialed Margaret's number again. This time there would be no polite inquiries. This time there would be no accepting easy lies. "Margaret," she said, when the assistant answered her voice dangerously quiet. "We need to talk, not on the phone, in person. I'm coming to the office, now." Before Margaret could protest, Amelia hung up. She walked into her bedroom, her movements stiff and robotic. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The soft, happy woman from a week ago was gone. In her place was a woman with haunted eyes and a grim, determined set to her mouth. She was a queen, just as Julian had always said, but a queen whose kingdom had been revealed to be built on lies, and she was about to go to war. The taxi ride to 1 Vanderbilt was a blur. The familiar Manhattan cityscape, once a symbol of her and Julian's shared success, now seemed hostile and alien. Every gleaming skyscraper felt like a monument to a lie. Amelia sat ramrod straight, her hands clasped tightly over her baby bump, a protective primal gesture. The naive, trusting woman, who had so lovingly sent a gift to her husband, was gone, incinerated in the fire of his betrayal. In her place was a woman, forged in cold fury, her mind whirring with a chilling clarity. She didn't go to the main entrance. She knew the protocol, the way visitors were announced, the chance that Julian would be alerted to her presence. Instead, she remembered a private entrance on the side street that led to a discreet elevator bank sold by the top executives. Margaret had pointed it out to her once. It was a small detail, a piece of insider knowledge, and she would use it. She was done playing by the rules of a game that had been rigged against her from the start. When she stepped out onto the 48th floor, the atmosphere was thick with a tension she could now finally understand. The whispers she might have once dismissed as office gossip now sounded like echoes of her own humiliation. She saw the sideways glances, the sudden silences as she walked past. They knew. They had all known. They had watched the drama unfold while she sat in her penthouse, blissfully ignorant. She walked directly to Margaret's desk, her gaze unwavering. The older woman looked up, her face pale. She saw the look in Amelia's eyes, and her professional mask crumbled. What she saw was not the gentle Mrs. Croft, but a woman on the verge of shattering, held together only by sheer force of will. "Mrs. Croft. Amelia, you shouldn't be here," Margaret stammered, standing up. "Don't, Amelia," said her voice low and steady, cutting through Margaret's flustered greeting. "Don't you dare lie to me again. Margaret, I know. I know about Cassandra. I know about the affair." Margaret's face fell. The years of carefully maintained composure dissolved into undisguised pity and regret. How she whispered. "That doesn't matter," Amelia said, her voice sharp. "What matters is what happened here last week. The day I sent the gift, I want you to tell me everything, every single detail. And if you value your conscience, you will not leave a single thing out." Julian was in a meeting in the main boardroom, a glass-walled enclosure in the center of the floor. He was visible to them, pacing, gesturing, commanding the room, completely unaware of the reckoning that was taking place just 50 feet away. Margaret hesitated, her eyes darting nervously towards Julian's office. Her loyalty, her job, her entire life was tied to that man. But then she looked back at Amelia. She saw the profound pain in her eyes, the slight tremble of her hands resting on her pregnant stomach. She thought of the beautiful, heartfelt gift and the ugly, violent way it had been desecrated. The lie she had told Amelia over the phone had been eating at her for a week. The guilt was a heavy, indigestible stone in her gut. "He made me get rid of it," Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. Amelia's blood ran cold. "Get rid of what?" "The gift. The watch. The picture of your baby." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Cassandra was in his office when it arrived. She thought it was for her. She opened it, and she saw the sonogram. She screamed. The whole floor heard it. It was a disaster. The scene played out in Amelia's mind, a horrifying, vivid nightmare. The woman who was sleeping with her husband, her hands on the picture of their unborn child. The scream, the humiliation. It was infinitely worse than anything she could have imagined. And Julian. Amelia pressed her voice devoid of emotion. "What did he do?" "He fired her. Right on the spot. Then he gave me the box and told me to make it disappear. He was terrified you would find out." "Where is it now?" Amelia's question was like a shard of ice. Margaret swallowed hard. She reached down into the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, a drawer she had kept locked all week. She pulled out the Patek Philippe box and placed it on the desk between them. Amelia stared at it. The elegant wrapping paper was gone, replaced by the stark lacquered wood. It looked like a tiny coffin. With trembling fingers, she opened the lid. The magnificent watch was there, gleaming cold and unused. Beside it, tucked away, was the silver frame with the sonogram and her hand-written note. She picked up the note. "My soul, your soul. 2 stars in the same sky." The words, once a declaration of transcendent love, were now a bitter, mocking epitaph. A tear, hot and heavy, finally escaped her and splashed onto the expensive cream stationery, blurring the ink. She wiped the tear away with an angry gesture. This was not the time for weeping. This was the time for action. "Thank you, Margaret," she said, her voice regaining its strength. She closed the box. "You've done the right thing." She looked over at the glass boardroom. Julian's meeting was wrapping up. People were starting to stand, shaking hands. He would be out in minutes. Margaret Amelia said, a new, chilling plan forming in her mind. "Does this company have a town hall meeting scheduled any time soon?" An all-hands meeting for the entire New York office. Margaret looked confused. "Yes, there's one this Friday. Julian is the keynote speaker. It's a big quarterly address." "Perfect," Amelia said. She gave Margaret a look of such intense, cold resolve that the older woman physically recoiled. "I want you to do one more thing for me. And this time, it's not for Julian. It's for me. And for every woman who has ever been made to feel like a fool." 2 days later, on Friday, the auditorium at Sterling Whitcroft Holdings was packed. Hundreds of employees, from fresh-faced interns to seasoned senior partners, filled the tiered seats. There was a buzz of anticipation in the air. The quarterly town hall was a major event, a chance to hear directly from the CEO. But today, the anticipation was laced with something else, gossip. The story of Cassandra's dramatic, screaming exit and swift dismissal had spread like wildfire. Everyone knew something had happened, but the details were murky, speculative. Julian Croft stood at the podium on the brightly lit stage, looking every inch the powerful, confident leader. He was dressed in a bespoke suit, his voice resonant and assured as he spoke about quarterly earnings, market projections, and the company's bright future. He was in his element, the master of his universe. The chaos of the previous week firmly behind him. He had dealt with Cassandra. He had placated Amelia. The storm had passed. He was just moving into his closing remarks, a rallying cry about integrity and teamwork, when the main doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. A figure was silhouetted in the doorway. It was a woman. As she walked down the central aisle, a stunned silence fell over the room. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people recognized her. It was Amelia Croft. She looked radiant ethereal. She was wearing a simple but elegant white dress that accentuated her pregnancy. Her hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. She looked like an angel, an avenging angel. Julian stopped mid-sentence, his words dying in his throat. His face went ashen. He stared at her, his confident posture collapsing, a look of pure, unadulterated terror in his eyes. He knew in that instant that his world was about to end. Amelia didn't look at him. She walked calmly and deliberately towards the stage, her heels clicking with a steady, resolute rhythm on the floor. In her hands, she carried the Patek Philippe box. As she reached the short set of stairs leading to the stage, a few security guards started to move towards her, unsure of how to react. But Amelia simply gave them a serene, dismissive glance, and they stopped confused. She walked onto the stage and approached the podium, stopping directly in front of her husband. She could feel the collective gaze of hundreds of people on her, could hear the frantic whispering. She ignored it all. Her focus was entirely on Julian. She leaned into the microphone, her voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the cavernous room. "My husband," she began, her voice ringing with a strength no one in that room had ever heard from her, "is a man who speaks about integrity, about loyalty, about the values that make this company great." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Julian was frozen, paralyzed, a statue of a guilty man. "He is also a man of grand gestures," she continued, her voice gaining an edge. "And recently, to celebrate a personal milestone, the anniversary of the day we met, I decided to make a grand gesture of my own." She held up the lacquered box for the entire auditorium to see. The giant screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying stock charts, now showed a close-up of her face, her expression one of heart-breaking composure. "I bought him this," she said, her voice starting to tremble, but with rage, not weakness. "A Patek Philippe watch, a symbol of timeless love." But that wasn't the real gift. She opened the box and took out the small silver frame. She held it up. The camera zoomed in, and the grainy image of the sonogram filled the screens. A collective gasp went through the audience. "This was the real gift," she said, her voice breaking for a moment. "Our baby, our future." I sent it to his office, hoping to surprise him to share a moment of joy. She turned her gaze fully on Julian, her eyes locking with his. All the love she had ever felt for him was gone, replaced by a contempt so profound it was like a physical force. But I was not the only one who saw it. My husband's mistress, Cassandra Miller, a senior analyst he was sleeping with for over a year, opened it first. She saw the picture of my baby, the baby of the man who had promised to leave his wife for her, and she screamed. The auditorium erupted. The whispers turned into a roar of shock and scandal. This was better, more salacious than any rumor. This was a confession, a public crucifixion. He lied to me. Amelia's voice soared over the din filled with righteous fury. He fired his mistress to silence her. He took this beautiful gift, this symbol of our family, and he ordered it to be destroyed, to be hidden, so he could continue to live his lie. He stood in our home, looked me in the eye, and told me he loved it while secretly trying to erase its existence. She placed the sonogram picture on the podium, directly in front of Julian. Then she picked up the watch, the magnificent, priceless Patek Philippe Calatrava. "My husband values beautiful, expensive things," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "He builds his life around them. He acquires them. He controls them. Women companies watches. It's all the same to him." And then, in a move that no one could have predicted, she drew back her arm, and with all her strength, she threw the Patek Philippe watch across the stage. It hit the far wall with a sickening crack and clattered to the floor. Its delicate mechanism shattered its timeless beauty, destroyed in an instant. The sound echoed through the silent, stunned auditorium. Amelia turned back to the microphone, her face a mask of triumphant, heartbreaking resolve. "The assets of this man, of this company, may be vast," she declared, her voice ringing with the authority of a queen who had just reclaimed her throne. "But his integrity is bankrupt, his loyalty is worthless. And as for my assets, the shares in this company that I own in my own name, a very significant portion, I believe, they will be on the market by the end of the day. I believe the term is a hostile takeover. I'm sure you all, as experts in the field, know what that means." She looked one last time at the broken man who had been her husband. His face was slack with shock, his empire crumbling around him on a stage of his own making. Without another word, Amelia Croft turned and walked off the stage, her back straight, her head held high. She did not look back. She walked out of the auditorium, out of the building, and out of the life that had almost destroyed her, leaving behind a storm of her own creation. The Queen had not just left the board. She had flipped the entire table. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. It's a story of devastating betrayal, but also one of incredible strength and the fierce, unyielding power of a woman reclaiming her own narrative. The shattered watch was more than just a broken object. It was the sound of a gilded cage being smashed to pieces. What happens next? Does Julian's empire truly crumble? Does Amelia, with her newfound power and the impending birth of her child, find a new kind of happiness? The fallout from that day would echo for years to come. If this story captivated you, if you felt every moment of Amelia's pain and cheered for her ultimate triumph, please let us know in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of justice and resilience, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales you won't want to miss. Click the notification bell so you're the first to know when our next story drops. Thank you for listening.